Hello. Okay, today we are going to review one of the websites that I'm currently building. It's in Ruby on Rails, and actually it's pretty much so far the same concept that we have seen in, if you have seen the other video, watch the other video on Laravel. Laravel is the PHP version of Ruby. Ruby is pretty much, Ruby on Rails is very compact. Everything is interrelated, and there is, I will say, little room for configuration. You pretty much should be following strictly the rules. You're going to have to learn their way, and once you do that, it's going to work much better. Okay, so of course, knowing Laravel will help you understand the framework. The syntax is somewhat different, but like I said, it's much better that you follow through strict rules and instead of importing things that you've learned elsewhere. So the directory tree that we have, one of the things I pretty much like is what they call the assets pipeline. So all of the files that you include in here, right, whether it is images, scripts, or style sheets, they're going to be accessible by any other page using them by, of course, what we do is we set the link in the layout. It's going to be views, articles, layouts, right? Layouts. So as you can see also here, this underscore, this means the partials. I think in Laravel they also use that syntax. So partials are little pieces of page that are going to be shared among different files, okay? There will be certain partials that are going to be in all of the files, like a header or a navigation bar or a footer, but there are others that are specific to a group of files, right? So that's why we distinguish between placing these partials in a folder or putting them in the layouts folder. All right, so layouts folder, here is the application one, all right? I click in here. As you can see, just by clicking, by invoking the files from the, you don't even need to name them all one by one, which is always cumbersome and error prone and all that stuff. You just include bring me all the stuff which is stylish or which is a script, and I will import it and I know how to take care of that. So that's the assets pipeline. Is really wonderful. I really like it very much. All right, so as you can see, the header, and we have the footer, which corresponds to the partials that I've just talked to you about. All right, that's as much as the views is concerned in a very abbreviated way to explain. Now let's go and watch some controllers, how everything is organized. Of course we have the MVC model pattern. Then we are going to have here the controllers. The controllers are going also to be using specific methods shared by all of them, for which you will place them in so-called helpers. Okay. Likewise, in Laravel, you will be placing most of the logic in the models, and just let the logic, the heavy work, right, the computation, all that stuff, validations and database work with in the models, and then the logic basically in the controllers. But I've seen in Laravel, the tendency is to almost leave the models empty and just import them from the controllers and do all the stuff there. So we are actually working, yes, with the model, but with the free pattern model, but it actually sort of not being so puritanist or purist in that stuff. Okay, let me see. For example, we could start with the application controller. I think in Laravel it's called base controller. We are including this is in a private method. We are including this in the application controller for the same reason that we have included the links when we were seeing the layout for the view, right? So it's a function that is going to be called over and over again or shared by different controllers, okay, throughout the application. In this case, what we can read in here, it says confirms a logged in user. Why? Well, because there are sections, of course, that are of restricted access and are only available for people who have already registered and activated their account, right? So how does that work? We create a method, def, unless we say unless it's logged in, which is pretty obvious. One of the things of Rails is that it looks like you are actually reading a book, writing rather than programming. But okay, unless we are logged in, but this login, of course, is a method in itself. And this method, like I said, because it's going to be shared by different controllers, also we're going to place them in a helper. It's going to be in the sessions helper, for example, right? Here is what we have. It just asks to see whether we have someone logged in, all right? We return back to the application controller to continue with this, and it says, unless they are logged in, store the location. Why store the location? Because when we are in a page that we intend to access and we are not allowed, then we are taken to a login page, of course, and once we have logged in, we don't want to go back and try to find where we were at. We want to be returned at that. Okay, so what it's doing here is storing the location so that it's pretty much friendly. This is pretty much the case of online newspapers. When you see an article and you want to make a comment, you are taken to login, but then you are returned back to the comment, to the article. Right, so store location is also part of the sessions helper. Right down here, you see, it keeps, it's going to return back to where you were before, right? And applications controller, we have the message, of course, and the redirection to the login URL, which is, again, another method. All right, let's continue with the sessions helper, because it's going to be pretty much central for all of the other controllers. Logs in the given user. Okay, what does the name, the comment explains it itself. When someone registers and an email is sent to a link, is sent to their account, they click on the link, you don't want to again enter the data that you have just written, right? So automatically after a successful click on the link, that is when the link is the same one that is stored in the table database, which is going to be compared. If they are exactly the same ones, you'll be automatically logged in. Okay, so this is just a way to make it, the process friendly. Right, now, we, of course, once we logged in, we want to remember him, so we are going to store cookies in here. That's what it's doing. This other method, it also self-explanatory. It says returns true if the given user is the current user. Why would you want to do that? Obviously, you want to check that, for example, the person who intends to perform an action that requires specific identification, like you're going to edit a comment or a post, you want to make sure that the person that is logged in is also the person who owns that asset, right? The comment or whatever, right? Returns the corresponding user. returns the user corresponding to the remember token. Well, whether he has been logged in through a session, a temporary cookie, or is more a persistent, we are going to anyway find out who that is, yes, in answering back to the method before. This is just the one that we have just seen, right? Now, forgets a persistent session is obvious. What it's going to actually do is delete that token that associates him with the session, associates the user with the session. So what do we do? User forget. What we are actually doing there, user is, of course, the model that matches the controller. So we find the model, which is right here. I forgot. And right here. Okay, so this is the method that we are calling for that sessions helper. And what does it say? Well, this is clear. It says, remember digest. What is this actually, this symbol? This symbol that corresponds to the column of the table. So what it's doing here is assigning a nil, that is doing away with whatever token it's written in there, right, and updating that attribute of the object, right, which is actually the row in the table. So that's how the forget works, just by deleting the cookie. Okay, logout is just going to destroy the cookie. It's exactly the same thing. Redirect back. This is again when someone wants to be, for example, wants to be funny, and you can see in the URL that it says myweb.com/ post/1/edit, and someone says, what if I change that 1 to 3 and then try to do someone else's post? So what it's going to do is you're not authorized, you are not the owner, we are going to send you back to where you come from, right? So that's the way it's working. So as you can see, we have the central methods in a session helper, which is basically the one that is going to hold a lot of the logic. A lot of the heavy work is going to be in the model, and then we have the different controllers just to make calls here and there, right? Account activations controller. Hold on a second. Yeah. Okay. How does it work? What do we have in here? It says it's a method called edit. So when someone logs in, right, entering his email, we first try to find whether there is someone under that email. Okay. So we again call the model. We use the method find by, which you can find in documentation, and then you enter the parameter, which is the email, right? So you find a user, okay, there is someone, and then if you see if there is such a user, and then I call again back to the method activated in the model, and it's authenticated. So what we do is we are going to enter that ID in the activation column of the table, right? We activate the user and we log in the user. You remember this one? We have just seen it before in the helper. So it's directly, well, account activated. This is the flash. This is going to be reading, and in case the link was broken for whatever the reason, well, it will have to be returned back to where he came from. It will have to be back in the registration form. Okay, so this is just another controller. We're going to just close it to avoid more stuff. Controller. Well, I said more stuff of the same. More stuff of the same. We have just seen this the controller, the one that is actually handling the logic. And this is, well, pretty much about everything. Maybe I want to show you. Maybe you want to see some. Hold on, I think I have that. No, I first have to change my directory. Hold on a second. How it looks like so far. Takes a while, a few seconds, so 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds, depends if it's early in the morning. All right, so my code is running in here. I'm actually using C9 as a development environment, which is pretty good. One of the other things I use, of course, it's the, yes, not worry, no problem. That's because we have not yet activated the, we have not waken up PostSQL. Okay, 1 second. Okay, now it should be okay now. All right. Okay, good. So this is pretty much so far what I'm doing. Well, like I said, of course, it's just now under development. This navigation bar is part of those partials that belong to the logout, to the layout, the sign up form. If I click on here, you're going to see that it's going to return, because I have not yet included client validation. It's going to go back to the controller, and it's going to check. It's going to do the check-ins. Well, we're going to see then the validations, but if I can here, it's going to show me the errors, right? Then it can be blank, blah, 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 blah. So this is something that we're going to find here in the model. Like I said, validations and the heavy stuff is going to be right here. What we have here up here is just callback functions. There are some interesting things in here. First of all, more callback functions. What are we doing right here? So we are actually saying only logged in users will be able to access the index, edit, update, and destroy. Okay, but that's a necessary condition, but not sufficient. In the sense, not sufficient for all of them. For example, and then if we want to edit a file, a post, and a comment, just like I mentioned before, we want to make sure that the person who is logged in is the person who actually owns the asset. So that's why we call the correct user method. Okay, it's a callback function right here. Before the action happens, that has to be destroy. The only one who can destroy users is the administrator. Okay, so he has to be logged in. He has to be logged in, right, to destroy, but it's not sufficient. He has to be the administrator. Okay, so that's the way it works. And well, one of the other things, of course, pretty noticeable, if you have already seen or read the code, is that we don't need to send the variables to the views as we have to do with Laravel. Okay, so these variables are accessible already in the views. We don't have to do any sort of return view with and then an array of data or whatever, right? So it's pretty much convenient. And well, what else? Oh yes, well, we could do. I mean, I have been testing it. I hope it doesn't screw up now, you know, in the middle of my presentation. Everything has been tested. We've done TDD and integration test. Okay, sometimes they are simple, sometimes they include interaction between the three parts of the pattern, MVC. It also takes a little while, you know, especially if I've just started in the morning, you know. Good. Okay, so 54 tests, 200 assertions, and set of failures. That's what we have. The test layers, and folders, and the fixtures, and all that stuff to fixtures to include dummy data, you know, in order to have something to work with when you are actually developing. So the testing is pretty much high level, so it's not as difficult as you will think it will have to be. Other things that I use, of course, version control. Every time I'm continuously saving. I start with my JIT session. At the end of my work shift, I uploaded everything to. I test it and then I upload it to Bitbucket, and then I can deploy. One of my favorite deployments is deploy HQ. That kind is really great. It's very easy, and then that's it. So I hope you get a nice idea of how things work. Rails is maybe it's more difficult to learn than Laravel, but it's also rewarding in many senses once you get the whole of it, or how that works. So hold on a second. So I'm going to be logging out. I thank you very much for your time, attention, and it has been longer than I thought. Okay, bye-bye.